Beginning Sewing Level 2. I'm Janet Corzatt, and I'm going to be leading you through this next level so that you can add mini samples to your sample notebook that we started in Level 1, and you'll be sewing a kimono-style robe. Here's a sample of what you'll be making. Now, a kimono-style robe is an easy fit design. It's off the shoulder, and this has a lot of roominess. It's a unisex design too, so it's suitable for men or women. And I designed this pattern that way so that it's easier for beginners to sew. We're going to rough cut as we did in Level 1, which means you'll just take your scissors and you'll cut in the margin of each piece to separate the pieces. You want them small enough they'll fit on the ironing board easily so that you can iron your pieces nice and flat with a good amount of heat but no steam. After you have ironed them, then you're ready to trim on the actual cutting line. You'll need to make your decisions at that point as to what size you want to use and what length you want to make. You'll take off all of the excess, trimming very snugly on the outer line of each pattern piece, and then we'll be ready to put them onto our fabric. And then just some general things that you'll need to know as you're preparing your pattern pieces. These are unisex patterns, and so the sizing is for men and women, and so are the lengths. You'll find there's a Mrs. cutting line for each length and a men's cutting line. Now, the pattern companies think that all women are 5'5" to 5'6" inches tall, and all men are 5 feet 10 inches tall. So if you're a tall woman, use the men's cutting line, or if you're sewing this for a man who is closer to 5 feet 5 inches, you'd use the Mrs. cutting line. Now, on our guide sheet, you have lots of choices for layouts. You'll need to look closely and find which variables match your fabric and your pattern selection. Are you using 60-inch wide fabric or 45-inch wide fabric? Do you have a contrast, or are you making it without contrast? What is the length you're using? What's the size you're using? So you'll need to read that information and determine which layout is going to work for your situation. We also need to take a look at seam finishes. Now, if we don't do something to the edges of this fabric after we make the garment, our seams will unravel when it goes through the wash. If every beginner had a serger, this would be how you finish your seam allowances, using a serger. But beginners don't usually have that. Sometimes I'll have a student who has only a straight stitch machine. So then we sew the seam, we do a straight stitch about 1/4 inch from the outer edge, and then use pinking shears to trim the edge. But these days, most people have a zigzag on their machine, and so we'll be zigzagging our seam allowances. We're ready to turn the page of our instruction sheet and to join the shoulder seams. So I've put the back down with the right side of the fabric up, and I have one of my front pieces here that I'm putting right sides together. We want to match the notch and match the edge of the shoulder, and we'll pin crosswise of the direction we'll be sewing. Now, when we pin these shoulders, you can go ahead and pin both sides and then sew them, but don't be concerned that this part doesn't match. Your sleeve will go in here, and then this part will come down, and your sides will match perfectly. I've completed my shoulder seams and finished them with the zigzag. Now we're ready to put in the sleeves. The thing to know about sleeves is that the double notch is the back of the garment, single notch is the front. So I've laid out my robe here. This is the back, and here's the front. And now we know that this is the sleeve that belongs to this armhole because the notches are matching. We also have the little snip that we put in to mark where the dot was that will match with the shoulder seam. So I'm just going to move this and place it on the shoulder seam, right sides together, and we'll put a pin at that position. We're ready to sew our 5/8 inch seams, so I'll align my edges, and we're sewing with regular stitch length, 2.5. Remember to take out your pins as you come to them. A little back stitch to start. you'll want to make sure that everything stays flat as you're sewing. We are putting together two opposite shaped curves, so just feel with your fingers and make sure there aren't any lumps or bumps underneath. With our robe project pretty well completed, I want to give you a few more samples for your sample notebook. We'll start with the double row method of gathering. I have set my machine on a long stitch length, about 4.5, and I have put dark thread on top and red thread in the bobbin. We're going to be sewing with a 1/4 inch seam allowance for the first row of stitching. So I'm lining up to sew a 1/4 inch from the edge. We don't want to have any back stitching at either beginning or end, and we want to begin and end with long thread tails. So let me stitch the first row. Some long thread tails there. Now I'm going to move over a little bit and sew a second parallel row at about 3/8. Same long thread tails, no back stitching. Then I will take a pin and put it vertically right here on the end. If I hold my fingers on the pin, I can wrap my thread tails in a figure 8 around the pin, just a couple of wraps to secure it. And then on the opposite end, I want to separate my thread tails very gently so that I can hold on to the bobbin threads. Sometimes it's helpful just to put a pin in between to kind of unwrap things. I'll hold on to the 2 bobbin threads, wrap around my finger and hold on, and then I can slide the gathers. This creates some nice gathers in your fabric, and you can adjust as needed, either tighter or looser, so that your piece would fit whatever you're attaching it to. And there's your double row method of gathering. So our robe is finished, and we're getting quite a collection of samples in that sample notebook, as well as the apron that you made in level 1.